Hello, so we're group 1 and our topic is MapReduce, types and formats and features, and I'll start introducing the topic. So we talked about MapReduce, I believe last week, where it has this format for map and reduce. This is the general form for MapReduce. Some things discussed before was that it's important to note that the map input key and value pairs, so K1 and V1, are different than the map output types, K2 and V2. Second, the reduce input has to have the same type as the map output. So reduce input has to match this map output when working together. Third, the reduce output types K3 and V3 can be different from the reduce input types. So these types don't have to be the same as you're going through. Second, we can have a combiner function. So this combiner function kind of works the same as the reducer, and then its output types are intermediate keys that then feed this reducer. This was like a default with setting up a MapReduce with just default features, values for MapReduce. And then the textbook kind of goes into this in more detail of like what these default values mean. So talking through this a bit in more detail, again, these are the default job settings. This mapper class, this is just the generic type for the mapper, and it allows it to work with any key or value types. Hopefully my mouse should be visible. 3 map input and output keys of the long writable class. So again, these are just default values. So setting this map output key to long writable, and then setting the input and output to text for the values. Next, we have this hash partitioner. So this hash partitioner is again the default partitioner for this, which hashes a record's key to determine which partition it belongs to. We'll discuss the setting of reduce tasks in the next slide. This setting it as 1 is a little, again, we'll talk about that in more detail. 8, reducer is the default reducer type, so again, reducer.class is the default. It is, similarly to our mapper class, it is a generic type which allows writing all its inputs to its outputs. 9, the output key is also long writable in this default example given in the book. And then the values are all text. Lastly, we have this text output format for the output class. Again, this is default values for the output format, which writes out records once per line and converts keys and values to strings by separating with a tab character. Again, this was very intro, like default MapReduce with default values to show an example to start. We mentioned the default MapReduce, the number of reducers. In the example, it's set to 1 by default, but like the book mentioned, most real-world jobs will actually set this to a very large number. Low numbers cause a job to run very slowly as everything is running through just one reduced task, so it doesn't really help speed things up. But then on the flip side, they mentioned that having too many reduced tasks and breaking things down into too many small files is actually suboptimal, so it's more of a kind of practice and get used to what numbers are best. They mentioned that one rule of thumb is to aim for reducers that run for about 5 minutes each and produce at least 1 HDFS block's worth of output. So a question for this is, the reduce input doesn't need to have the same type as the map output. Is that true or false? I don't know if we should pause here, but then the answer to that is false. The reducer input actually has to have the same type as the map output.